Everybody, this is Mark Smith, host of Digital Roughnecks, and I'm here with Andrew Parker from SPL, and we're here to talk about something brand new, a, um, a proposed RSG standard. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, so listen, obviously emissions monitoring is a big focus of Digital Roughnecks and my company, all the operators that I talk to are always talking about emission standards. And something has come up sort of new, which is this whole responsibly sourced gas. And operators just want to know, how do I earn a premium for the product that I sell? So anyway, I understand there's a brand new committee at GPA Midstream. So tell me how that all came about and what that's all about.
Yeah, so back at the fall meetings in San Antonio for GPA, the conversation came up about starting a new emissions committee, right? So GPA has a technical branch, and underneath that technical branch, there's various committees that are focused on the analytical side of the products that Midstream handles, measurement. There's a pipeline integrity committee, there's a facilities committee, and in the world we live in today, with emissions continuing to just be paramount and at the forefront of many business decisions, the conversation came up of, should GPA have an emissions committee that's helping inform the industry of, rather than this top-down approach, this kind of new bottoms-up approach to emissions inventories. And so I stepped up and wrote the charter to form what we call the GMAC, or the Greenhouse Gas Measurement and Abatement Committee. It was officially accepted by the GPA Board of Directors on February 2nd, and we're looking forward to having our first in-person meeting in Oklahoma City at the Spring Convention, April 6th.
And so for those who might not be familiar with GPA Midstream, what's their kind of role in the energy market?
Yeah, so GPA tends to be the dominant industry trade group for the midstream industry. So they do a lot of they set a lot of standards, right? So a lot of the analytical standards that we use to measure and analyze hydrocarbon products, natural gas, NGLs, crude, etc., is really set by GPA. They have an advocacy branch, they have an education branch. So they tend to be the main midstream organization for the midstream midstreamers out there.
Okay. And they're also influential to upstream and downstream in the sense that, when I was talking to some clients in the upstream space, they say, oh yeah, we build gathering stations according to GPA specs. And so I would imagine, being in the midstream, there people either refer and or adopt their standards for both
Yeah,
upstream and
absolutely. I
downstream.
mean,
Yeah.
the GPA has I think, obviously it's a midstream centric organization, but its influence, it spans the entire hydrocarbon value chain, right? From things that happen at the wellhead all the way to the downstream sector. And I think, a lot of companies are integrated companies. They're upstream, they're midstream, and maybe they're downstream. And so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. GPA has had these standards around for years. They've really pioneered a lot of the standards that we follow, especially analytically. And so from that perspective, they really lead the way in this realm of setting the standard for the industry.
So when this committee got approved, anyway, Andrew invited me to participate, which I am. So both of us are on this committee. And so before we started this episode, we kind of wrote a few notes that we'd like to share with the anybody who's watching. So I'll share my screen. So anyway, this is just sort of a preview of some of the things we're talking about with this proposed standard. And part of the issue is that the energy producers have so much pressure on them from so many stakeholders, from ESG investors, and I hear about this all the time, about C-level executives having bonuses literally tied to their ability to prove the progress on net zero pledges. State regulators, I mean, we're in Colorado, heavy duty regulations, federal EPA, CPA, and FERC. And I want to talk about FERC on the next slide. Global OGMP 2.0, which is voluntary, but that's oil and gas methane partnership. Buyers of clean energy like the EU, They say, hey, if you want to sell to EU, you got to prove your low carbonness. And the SEC saying, all right, hey, all you companies that made a net zero pledge, time to prove it. So really, all of these guys are saying, prove it, prove something, right? And that's what this RSG standard is about. In fact, just a week or so ago, FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, basically said, if you want to get a pipeline approved, you have to prove that everybody going into that pipeline is not going to impact the environment. So in other words, hey, prove your low carbonness. Okay, this is going to be a major deal for midstream companies, right? And I happen to know a lot of people are trying to sell to the EU, especially now with the whole Russia Ukraine deal, right? All the EU players are saying, wait, how could we possibly get off of Russian gas? Well, we'd have to buy it from somebody who can then prove, because EU has cap and trade, so they have carbon trading and stuff. And then of course ESG wants to do some stuff as well, right? They want you to prove your stuff. So you and I, we kind of threw it out there. What do they want, right?
Yeah, and I mean, an RSG standard too, I think one of the utilities that you were kind of just touching on too, right, is just that provability piece, right? And you and I were talking before we started recording. We were talking about a webinar that we watched, and they highlighted some transactions where certified low carbon shipments were made, and gosh, the amount of time and effort and money and the consulting fees and this and that go into doing it, because right now there's nothing that that tracking the metrics is so difficult. And so I think one of the overarching motivations for people who were in the room when this GMAC committee first met was, can we come up with a standard that is reasonable, it's actionable, it's economical for producers of all sizes, not just the Shells and the Exxons and the Conocos, but can the small guys share in the love as well? And I think some of the wish lists that we've identified really makes sense, where if you can come up with a standard and be able to meet the criteria on this slide that we've kind of brainstormed, it's a no-brainer, right? And so that provable methane intensity is probably one of the ones you hear the most about, right? With using measurements and not formulas. Again, that bottom-up inventory approach to say, what is a reasonable methane intensity, and can you actually prove it? Can we do that with an RSG standard?
Right, and the reason why is because operators that have actually attempted to use actual measurements, once they get past some of the technical hurdles, they are coming to us and saying, hey, we're using actual measurements and we're lower by a significant amount than the formulas we're sort of forced to use by EPA and GSI. A lot of people, I had an episode on Quad O, B, and C, and if you haven't seen that, you definitely need to watch it. I have a cheat sheet that goes along with it, but some major shifts in LDAR standards. And so they're like, hey, if I can do a standard that can also meet EPA, wouldn't that be great? Also meets Colorado standards. And I've got clients who do this global standard, which is voluntary OGMP 2.0. And the big deal about that is it requires site and source level monitoring, right? Not just at the site level, but the source level, because you kind of need that to be able to do 2 and 3 as well. And I think this is a biggie, algorithmic standard that can be done objectively and autonomously, but you could always have a human auditor who could follow up later. It's no different than selling between upstream and midstream. If every time it took a human being and it was all subjective, like how much gas is going into the pipeline, no one would be able to do any business, right? I mean, there has to be objective, measurable things, right? And so that's just the way they work. I think ultimately they want a tradable RSG certificate, that they could trade and sell, to buyers who need that. Automated bottoms-up inventory, which gets to, I think you were mentioning another subcommittee out of all this, maybe a data standards committee that's going to be needed. And automated ESG reporting. I mean, why not? If you got the data, let's do that. and it has to have a good ROI, right? We can't. Some complaints have been that some of the certifications were really expensive, and so anything that they were earning in credits, they were spent on consulting fees. So we're going to try to get a real objective criteria.
Yeah, and to your points on 6 and 9, I think just to make a note about, with responsibly sourced gas, I think kind of the initial conversation was around being able to sell the gas at a premium to a utility company like Xcel. But I think when you start to look at in a broader context where this could go with, emissions measurement and carbon offsets in general, and certifying and actually being able to prove emissions reductions, being able to generate credits, and it's not just going to be all about the premium, right? Because a critique on responsibly sourced gas has been, well, when everyone's doing it, the premium goes away, right? But that might, even if that's the case, there's still an ROI to be had by following the standard and implementing, emission control techniques to where you can start to go down this path of carbon offsets and get into those different markets where there's potentially an even larger ROI when it comes to following RSG standards.
Right, and that credit thing really goes to what's called additionality, right? So if EPA is not requiring 0.2% and you can hit it, you are hitting a level that is above and beyond what is regulated. Okay, so that is, we're definitely going to be in a territory, because honestly, I know, I've talked about all the Quad OBC standard. There is no methane intensity standard, so that's a lot of headroom then for additionality. Okay, that they can earn. So I think a couple areas to follow up really in this, Andrew. I think one, we're going to go into way more detail in an upcoming online summit that we're going to do together, esgforenergy.com, and you're going to give the latest and greatest, have a lot more time to go into the details about this new proposed standard, and that's March 17th, and people can get a link to that before. It's esgforenergy.com. But also, if they want to participate in this standard, what would they need to do?
Yeah, so one of the beauties of this standard is that it's an industry-led effort, right? It's going to have subject matter experts from all different areas, from data to LDAR to back office emissions accounting, right? Everyone's going to have a seat at the table, and so if you want to be a part of it, if you're not already a member of GPA, go sign up, right? If most of the time the memberships are very reasonable, most midstreamers and upstreamers have membership in GPA, but if you're not, sign up and then reach out to me. I'll put you on the mailing list and keep you up to date as that charter for this group works through the review process at GPA, and then eventually we'll go out to ballot. The tentative plan right now is to have a work group session to talk about this in Oklahoma City before the GMAC committee. So that is tentatively scheduled from 9 to 11 on that Wednesday the 6th, right before the committee meeting. So those are ways that you can get involved, and I'll say don't get involved and be a passive observer, right? We want people to actively participate and share their feedback and say, this is what we want, this is what we need. And if an industry trade group's willing to come together and set the standard for us, then come be a part of it.
Right. Hey, thanks, Andrew, for really giving us a preview of this brand new, which I think is pretty exciting standard that's coming up that'll come from the industry itself. So.
Yeah, we'll have a follow-up, Mark, in a few months once we get past April, and hopefully this thing gets chartered, and we have a couple more meetings on it and really start to tease out some of the details. So I'll look forward to talking with you about it again.
Right.